among the 10. The other 9 commandments all have to do with actions that we perform or words that we speak. Stealing, slandering, killing, taking God's name in vain, dishonoring our parents. And those are all actions that we can see or hear. If you had your phone, you could take a video of that. But the 10th commandment, you shall not covet, that speaks to something that goes on inside your own head. You can't tell if a person is coveting unless you're a mind reader. You can't tell if I'm doing it right now. What does it mean to covet? I think it is fair to define coveting as desiring something that is not yours and should not be yours. When I was a child, I asked my mother, is it wrong to want a bike? And she said, no, it's wrong to want someone else's bike. And that was a very good answer for a child. And I carried that with me for more than 50 years now. Now, desire in and of itself is neither good nor bad. In fact, the word from the Greek that we translate desire, it reflects that ambiguity. For example, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus speaks of men looking at a woman that he shouldn't be looking at. And normally we translate the word there as lust. But the Apostle Paul uses the same word in 1 Timothy chapter 3 when he says, if a man aspires to be an elder, he desires a noble task. Desire, it's the same word, but we typically don't say that a man is lusting after the office of elder. That is, a good man is not lusting to be an elder. Likewise, Jesus used this word when he said he desired to eat the Passover meal with his disciples before he died. Okay, that was not a covetous desire on Jesus' part. So again, desire by itself is neutral. Could be good, could be bad, could be neither. It depends on what you're desiring. The Apostle Paul, before he became a Christian, he realized that he was desiring things that he should not be desiring. He was coveting. He was sinning inside his own head. I believe that Paul conscientiously obeyed the other 9 commandments. That is, did he work on the Sabbath? Oh, absolutely not. He was a Pharisee. He wouldn't think of doing that. Did he worship idols? Not on your life. I think Paul would have stabbed himself in the heart if he ever caught himself worshiping an idol. Did he cheat on his wife? No, he didn't have one. Did he take another man's wife? Absolutely not. Did he steal from the poor box like Judas did? No. Did he bear false witness? I don't think so. I know that he had hated Christians and he pursued them to death, but I don't believe he stooped to concocting false evidence about concerning them, like the Pharisees did to Jesus. I think that he was at least an honestly cruel persecutor. Even so, Paul could not shake the fact that despite all his scrupulous law keeping, his heart was still corrupt. He knew that he was craving things that he should not crave. And that is covetousness. That's lust, if you will. And it laid hold of his mind, even while his outward behavior seemed pure. He confessed this in Romans 7, verses 8 and 9, verses that were read for us earlier. He said, sin, seizing opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced in me every kind of covetous desire. Once I was alive apart from the law, but when the law came, sin sprang to life and I died. Now, what do you think of that? Did Paul have an overly tender conscience? I mean, how bad really is a sin that it goes on inside your own head? If you don't do the bad thing and you don't say the bad thing, what's the big deal if you merely think the wrong thing? I believe that the problem, or at least the big part of the problem, is that thought sins never really stay within the confines of your own mind. They have a way of leaking out. James 1, 14 and 15 say this. Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So desire, and in this case, evil desire, it's like the newly conceived baby, the embryo in the womb. You can't see that. Sin is like the but then the sin that it gives birth to is like the baby that you definitely can see 9 months later. And then the end result, death. Oh, that's like the corpse that you can see and smell sometime after that. The mental sin snowball into overt sin, and it rolls to a stop only at death. And that foul-smelling corpse at the end of it, it began as a tiny, invisible fetus that nobody could see. The wreckage of sin started as an unaborted thought that was allowed to grow and fester within the human heart. Internal thoughts reveal themselves sooner or later. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Jesus said, the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. It's just a matter of time. So, guard your heart, that secret part of you that no one else can see, no one else knows. And 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, Paul says this, no one can know a person's thoughts except a person's own spirit. However, there will come moments when that facade is punctured and everyone then is able to see whether what's inside you was light or darkness. A former pastor of mine used to use this illustration. Said, here's a cup that has liquid in it, and it's opaque. You can't see inside it. How can you tell if that's water or wine? You can't tell, but shake it and see what spills out. Okay? Well, sometimes it may not be until we're shaken that everybody can see what was inside us all the time. For example, as I stand here, can you tell if I'm cowardly or brave? I don't think you can tell. But shake me like that cup, and you'll see what's inside me. So if a crazed gunman were to appear and start firing away, and I ran over to Thomas there and crouched behind him and held him up like a human shield, then you would know what a coward I am. But if I stood and confronted the shooter and tried to disarm him, even as I took the bullets to myself that he intended for you, then you'd be able to say, oh, well, I guess Paul was a brave man. So who's going to preach for us next time? Now, in the Bible, we learned that we must control not only our actions, but also our thoughts. That matters too. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, Paul wrote, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And in Philippians 3:18, he wrote, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable. Well, if there's any excellence or anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Now, commandments like that indicate to me that we have some control over the thoughts that we think, at least for those who are not profoundly mentally ill. Okay, I think some of those people don't seem to be able to control their thoughts very well. But generally speaking, thoughts are not things that happen to us. They are things that we choose to do. But here it gets tricky. Do you feel that you're able to exercise control over your desires? The desires that you have inside you are desires subject to your will in the same way that actions or even thoughts are subject to your will. That is not so obvious to me. For example, I like and I desire to eat French silk pie, whereas I do not like and I have no desire to eat coconut cream pie. That's just for me. But now those desires do not necessarily dictate my actions. I can choose not to eat French silk pie if I'm on a diet, or I think it's too expensive, or there's only one piece left, and I magnanimously leave it for you, even as I wipe the drool from my lips. Likewise, I can choose to eat coconut cream pie. If I'm a guest at your house and you present it to me saying, here, I prepared this myself, it's my favorite. And then I say, oh, well, thank you so much, chomp, chomp, munch, munch. That is, I can choose to eat or not eat French silk or coconut cream. But there's no way I could choose to desire coconut over French silk. That's just built into my genetics. It's built into my wiring. You could command me to eat coconut, or you could forbid me to eat French silk, but you couldn't forbid me, you couldn't command me to crave coconut, and you could forbid me to eat chocolate, but you couldn't stop me from craving it. Now, as human beings that are both made in the image of God and terribly fallen, our natural desires are all over the place. Some of them align with the will of God, some of them align with what is good and healthy and permissible, and some do not. For example, I know some people who actually like nutritious food. They honestly prefer things that are good for them. So they'll choose, seaweed and kale over a deep dish pizza and chocolate cake. On the other hand, some of us understand all too well a man like Jay Leno, who said, "I haven't had a vegetable since 1969. Give me the double cheeseburger and fries." Now, my question is, can you help what you like? Are your desires fixed? Are they inborn? Are they immutable? Maybe you can control your actions. Maybe you can even control your thoughts. But is it a fool's errand to try to change your desires? If you find that some of your desires are inappropriate and you wish you didn't have them, is that something that you just have to live with, or can you succeed in changing them? Are desires like your height? Okay, like if you are 5'7", you can wear high heels to look taller, or you can slouch to look shorter, but you're still 5'7". My inclination has always been to say that your desires, they just are what they are. Don't worry about trying to change them. That's wasted effort. Just concern yourself with your behavior and what you choose to think about. But then it occurred to me there are counterexamples in which people have succeeded in changing their desires, sometimes even by accident. And I can think of two ways that this happens. One is by habit, and I'm going to use myself as an example. Every morning, without exception, I have a large cup of strong coffee. I like it. I crave it. I would be much put off without it. But here's the thing. I started drinking coffee when I was 8 years old. A Swedish immigrants or second generation Swedish, always a pot of coffee on the house. Always a pot of coffee on in the house. I started drinking coffee when I was 8. I didn't like it then. So why in the world was I drinking it? Because grown-ups drank it. And I wanted to look like a grown-up. It seemed to me that that was advanced, that was cool, that was mature, and I wanted to play the part of a prodigy and move at ease within adult circles. But then about the age of 13, I noticed that I began to like coffee. I drank it for pleasure, whether anyone was watching me or not. That is, my desire conformed to my habit, or you might say my addiction. Habitual behavior dragged a brand new desire into existence. I think habits can create desires out of thin air. And that works for good or ill. That works both ways. I have a theory that nobody likes their first cigarette, their first beer, or their first cup of coffee. They take it for some other reason, but then that develops into a habit that eventually becomes a desire that they can't shrug off. And that's why it's worth the effort to try to cultivate good habits that don't appeal to your desire at first. There is such a thing as an acquired taste. For example, I know some people who actually like to exercise. Maybe they started because they wanted to be good at a sport or because they wanted to be attractive to members of the opposite sex. But once the habit of exercise got rolling, the exercise itself became a pleasure. They created a desire for it. Now, that never happened to me, but I trust the testimony of those who say it happened to them. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14 says, "Solid food is for the mature, for those who have had their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to discern good from evil." The phrase constant practice appeals to me. Constant practice can work wonders. It can create new desires. It can extinguish old ones. And sometimes it can even make wise the simple. Now, I said I could think of two ways by which we might succeed in changing our desires. The one is habit, and the other is mental adjustment to relevant facts. I wish I had a catchier way of expressing that. That's the best I could come up with. Mental adjustment to relevant facts. For example, a man falls in love with a woman. He desires her. She is attractive. She has a wonderful personality, and they find that they have a lot in common. They even share a birthday, and he contemplates a future with her. But then he discovers that she is his full biological sister. They were twins, separated at birth and raised in different adoptive homes. Now, nothing about that woman's desirability has changed, but his desire for her as a life partner drops to zero, solely on the basis of this new information that has been incorporated into his understanding. Knowledge has changed his desire. In book 4 of C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia, by the way, I hope you read all of those books. Start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, read them and then read them again. In book 4, The Silver Chair, Puddleglum and Eustace and Jill they're eating venison in the homeless of giants. They're feasting on this tasty venison, and then suddenly Puddleglum says, "Don't eat another bite." And he has overheard the giants talking about killing the stag that they are now eating. And it turns out it was a talking stag. Now, in Narnia, there are both regular animals and talking animals. And the talking animals are sentient beings. They're conscious, they're intelligent, just like human beings. And so for Puddleglum, this tasty meal has, by virtue of this new knowledge, become cannibalism. And he no longer desires the food. It's not tasty. It's disgusting. A missionary friend of mine, told me that he had some kind of health concern. Due to health concern, there were now some foods that he could not eat. And what helped him to avoid them was to mentally label them as poison. He said, if I think of them as poison, then I don't want to eat them. And that makes me wonder, if we could learn to label certain inappropriate desires as disgusting, perverted, poisonous, if that would go some way toward diminishing their power. Paul wrote in Romans 6:21, "What benefit did you reap at that time from the things you are now ashamed of?" And that suggests to me that at a certain time, they were not ashamed of these certain things, but they've come to be ashamed of them. That is, they have come to label certain things as shameful, disgusting, poisonous. And I suspect that mental adjustment diminished some of those old desires. So desires are very intriguing things. They can be good or neutral or bad. I don't think that they're as easy to govern as our actions or our thoughts, but they're not completely immovable, fixed, written in stone. At least some of them can be budged one way or another by habit or by mental adjustment. But there's one thing that desires are definitely not. They are not God. They are not our gods, and they must not be established as such. Now, in the third passage that was read for us, Philippians 3:19, Paul spoke of some people who had made a god of their desire. He phrases it this way: he says, their God is their stomach. Might have said belly in this, the same thing. Their God is their stomach. I almost titled the sermon, The Stomach God, but I thought that was too obscure. But here's the thought. Just as earlier, I gave you a definition of coveting. Coveting is desiring what is not yours and should not be yours. So now I'm going to give you a definition of God, small g. Okay, someone's God. Your God can be defined as whatever you give absolute authority to, whatever you decide has the right to order you around. Your God is that which commands you and you obey. Hopefully, your God, small g, corresponds to God, capital G, the one true God. You want your God to be the one true God. And for many people, though, it's just not so. The God to which they give ultimate authority is, to put it bluntly, their stomach. Their stomach is hungry, they feed it. Now, of course, here their stomach stands for any desire that they happen to feel. And if they have competing desires, then the strongest desire wins. There's no higher authority. There's no governing a voice above that, which can say, no, don't fulfill that desire. It's bad, it's wrong, it's poisonous. Just because you feel that doesn't mean it's right. I dived very deeply into contemplation over this issue 6 years ago because of a conversation that I had with an atheist, person who didn't believe in God. I can't remember the conversation in its totality. We must have been talking about moral obligation as it related to God, because he quoted with approval a comment made by atheist magician Penn Jillette. You know, Penn Jillette is a Penn and Teller thing. You can look them up. Later, I Googled this quote, and I found it comes from a story that Penn Jillette tells quite often. Penn Jillette said that he took a date to hear a lecture by an atheist. After the talk, the atheist took questions. And the person next to Penn Jillette's date asked, if there's no God, then what's to stop me from raping and killing everyone around me? Rather provocative question. And Gillette's date raised her hand and said, can I change my seat? Okay. Now Gillette said, here's the quote. My answer is, I do rape all I want, and the amount I want is 0. And I do murder all I want, and the amount I want is 0. The fact that these people, these Christians, think that if they didn't have this person watching over them, they would go on killing and raping rampages is the most self-damning thing I can imagine. I don't want to do that. Right now, without any God, I don't want to jump across this table and strangle you. I have no desire to strangle you. I have no desire to rape you. You know what I mean? Think, oh boy, what a mic drop moment that is, Oh, this pendulum really going to town. There you go, you silly Christian. You just got your butt handed to you by this deeply ethical atheist. What are you going to say for yourself now? Well, first of all, I empathize with Penn Jillette because I'm just like him. I don't desire to rape or kill anybody either. Those things are not written into my nature. They're not in my wiring. They're not a temptation for me. I may be a coward, but I don't think that I'm a naturally violent or predatory man. I have no desire to do those things. But so what? Some people do have those desires. And I want all of those people to become Christians and become so scared of God that they don't fulfill those desires. I would hate for an atheist to persuade one of those nutcases to disbelieve in God. Because if those dangerous people stop believing in God and God will hold them accountable, look out, we're all in trouble. But there's a deeper point. Is desire or the lack thereof really the ultimate reason why Penn Jillette and Paul Lundquist do not commit fearsome villainy like Jack the Ripper? Is desire the fundamental reason why we would never do that? If desire has the ultimate say-so, then God help us, because desires change. They are not immutable, as I think I proved earlier. And if you have decided that desire will govern your actions, that desire is your God, well, then let's hope and pray that your desires remain as holy as they are now. I think it's actually a very dangerous thing, a disturbing thing to say, the reason I don't do that bad thing is because I don't want to. Well, what if tomorrow you want to? Do you just always do what you want to do? Is that what determines your actions? Today you are magnanimous because you want to be. I think that tomorrow, that means tomorrow, if you want to be predatory, then you'll be predatory. Do you always just do what you desire? New Testament scholar D.A. Carson was talking with a pastor friend of his about a troublesome case in the pastor's church. An elder of that church was leaving his faithful wife for the woman that he was committing adultery with. And he couldn't understand why people were making such a big deal of it. Now, this elder was a medical doctor, and he had served for years as a medical missionary in the developing world. And that seemed like a very self-sacrificing thing to do, a very godly thing to do. How was it possible for a hero like this medical missionary to do such a dastardly thing now? Well, the pastor had an interesting take on it. He said that this doctor, all his life, had only ever done what he wanted to do. He never did something just because it was right, simply because it pleased God. He had never gone against the grain of his own desire. So when he wanted to be a medical missionary, he did that. And when he wanted to leave his wife for a pretty woman, he did that. Now, outsiders found his behavior very strange and inconsistent, but from his perspective, it was absolutely consistent. His God was his stomach. He had always just done what he wanted to do. Since I heard that story years ago, I've seen many similar examples. People who did good when they wanted to do good, and then they seamlessly did evil when they wanted to do evil. Their gods went by the name of want to and don't want to. Their God was their stomach. Now, if you would be a follower of Jesus Christ, and it is my hope and prayer for each one of you that you become followers of Jesus Christ if you are not already, and that you remain so. If you would be a follower of Jesus Christ, then you must come to terms with the fact that there will be moments when you must do what you don't want to do. And you must refrain from doing what you really want to do. And it's great when your desires coincide with the will of God, or when you can succeed in adjusting those desires so that they can come to agree with the will of God. But that is not always going to happen. Sometimes you will have to make a choice between your desire and God's desire. And I think it's a good thing when those moments come into your life, because they give you the opportunity to show that your stomach is not your God. The one true Lord God of hosts is your God. Now, such a moment as I'm describing came to Jesus himself. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as he contemplated his own desire, his stomach told him that he did not want to go to the cross and suffer death by torture. He was at a fork in the road. My desire or the will of the Father? And that night, in that moment, those two things, they did not coalesce into perfect alignment. And he actually asked for the satisfaction of his desire. With God, all things are possible. Let this cup pass from me. But that was not the ultimate thing for him. Ultimately, Jesus prayed, not my will, but yours be done. Let's pray. God, thank you for the satisfaction of so many of our desires and for the great pleasure that gives us. Even so, we would not confuse our desire with your voice. Please conform our will to yours and our desires to your desires. And when that prayer goes unanswered or is flatly denied, then teach us to say with our Savior Jesus Christ, not my will, but yours be done. In his name, amen.